Hi everybody, Julie here with Northern Waters Cleansing Co. Right now I am measuring out my oils, water, lye, and additives. Right now I'm actually getting 2 batches of soap ready. So you saw me pour out 2 cups of water. The next step will be adding the sodium hydroxide. I get mine from Candora soap, and it's always a good quality. I've never had any problems with it. Even when I leave the lye solution for a couple of days, there really isn't much lye lint or anything like that in it. So I'm going to zero out my scale and get the lye measured out. I tend to use these handy little trivets underneath my container of lye water because the solution really does get pretty hot. So I've just poured the granular lye into the water. I'm giving it a good mix, and then I'm just going to let this cool down before I use it. For the 2 batches I have planned for these, I want these to cool down to room temperature because I will be soaping at room temperature. I will be melting my hard oils and butters, but I'll be letting them cool down to room temperature as well. The lye fumes are a little intense right now, making my throat a little scratchy, so I'm going to leave this. I'm just going to walk away and get some fresh air. What I'm doing here is measuring out 2 batches of oils, and so what I do is I mix the hard and the soft oils together, then I heat them up, and then I let them cool to room temperature. So right now I am adding in the castor oil, and you'll see in a minute here that I've got another bucket going. Almost there. I like to pour really slowly because I don't want to make any mistakes. Otherwise it throws the whole batch off. Okay, so there's 1 bucket of oils for 1 batch of soap. I've got 2 oils in there already. So I'm going to zero out my scale. This bucket already has canola oil in it, and so I'm just going to add the castor oil to it. And again, I'm going very slowly. I don't want to screw up my measurements here, so then I would have to start all over. There we go. So both batches now have canola oil. I'm going to move on to olive oil, then my coconut oil, and then my shea butter. So I'm doing the same thing here on the second batch, measuring out some more oil. So this is my coconut oil that's going in. And the reason I like to mix it with the soft oils and then heat it up is actually, it's not because of the coconut oil, it's because of the shea butter. It's such a finicky butter to work with, I find. I used to use the heat transfer method to melt my coconut oil in my shea butter. And if you're not familiar with the heat transfer method, essentially what it is you mix your lye and your water together, and while that lye water is still quite warm, you use it to melt your hard oils and butters. So if you look at a couple of my previous videos, you'll see that I've used that method to melt the coconut oil and the shea butter. But what I found was sometimes that lye water temperature can just be too high, and it actually damages the shea butter, so that the end result is like this crumbly, kind of strange textured bar. So like a prime example I can think of is this fruit punch soap that I made not too long ago, and I will put the link in the description or up in the corner of the window so you can check out that video. You'll see when I cut that soap that it's actually kind of crumbly when I cut it, and that's because I do believe that the shea butter was somewhat damaged by the high heat of the lye water. So I reverted back to really the best way to melt the hard oils that I've found, and that is to mix them in with my soft oils and then heat them all up slowly and gently together. Once the oil mixture has returned to room temperature, that's when I do my soaping. And I found, that will usually give me a very thin batter when I soap at room temperature, especially here where I'm soaping. I'm actually down, this is my office, and it's in a basement, the basement of my house, and it's really cool down here. So soaping at room temperature can actually be like I'm soaping at, could be 68 degrees Fahrenheit down here. So that's pretty cool. And I can usually blend my batter for a little while before I get any sort of decent trace. That's the process that I use. It seems to work better for the shea butter, and then end resulting bar of soap is just a little better. Now that said, the fruit punch bar that I made a little while ago is still good. I'm definitely going to use it myself. I have no doubt that my kids will use it, And there's nothing wrong with the soap. It's just, it's not the consistency that I would like. I wouldn't call myself a perfectionist by any means, but, I do have standards, and some people would say they're rather high. But truly, I'd just rather that the soaps are as consistent as can be, and that they cut nicely. Long story short, going back to my old method, and if you're a new soap maker, I highly suggest that you just melt your oils, your hard oils and soft oils together, melt them gently and slowly, and you probably won't have too many issues. I gotta tell you, one thing about shea butter is it is a pain to get out of the bag like this. I did see one video where a woman suggested melting down your shea butter when you first get it and then putting it into molds. So like little, almost like embed molds, right? So yeah, you can take out a couple little ounces at a time, and then you don't have to do what I'm doing here and getting your hands all messy and trying to get a teeny tiny little bit of shea butter off of a big block. The next step is for me to very slowly and gently heat up these oils so that the hard coconut oil and shea butter all melt, and stir it together, and you'll see that it's just liquid oil after that point, liquid oil and one butter, and then I'll be ready to soap once it's cooled down. Okay, so I am back with some melted oils and butter here. You can see this one still has a couple of chunks of the shea butter that are just very slowly and gently melting. And this one here is all melted already. So the next step is for me to incorporate some kaolin clay into the melted oils. And also, I like to put sodium lactate into my cooled lye water solution. And that's just to help harden up the bars. So the sodium lactate is essentially glorified salt water. And because I use a lot of soft oils in my recipe, I need that salt water or sodium lactate to harden up the bars enough that I can cut them relatively quickly. Meaning my recipe will usually sit for 2 to 3 days in the mold before I actually start cutting it. Fragrance oils and some other external factors can shorten that time down. So sometimes you'll hear me say, oh, it's only 24 hours later and I'm cutting a loaf of soap. But it really just depends on lots of different factors, and I can say that usually it's about 2 to 3 days before I can cut the bar of soap. So what I'm going to do is show you how I incorporate the kaolin clay into this one since it's all melted. We'll let this guy here just continue to melt slowly. This is a huge bag of kaolin clay. It's 2.25 kilograms worth of it, so that will probably last me another year, I would say. I'm only using 2 teaspoons in this size batch. My bigger batches I use more, but so I don't measure this exact by any means. I'm just getting my trusty plastic spoon. You may have read in the description on some of my other videos that I hate this blender that I had been using. This is just a cheapo Betty Crocker $20 blender, like immersion blender, hand blender. And it was leaving lots of bubbles in my soap. So I'm gonna try the KitchenAid one. This was actually one I had in my kitchen, but I hadn't been using it for food or anything like that. So I thought, well, instead of it just sitting there doing nothing, I'm gonna use it for making soap. So this will be the maiden voyage of the KitchenAid. So I'm going to use it to kind of capture the clay in the bucket there. And I will tap out all those air bubbles. I don't want bubbles in my soap. And I'm gonna put this on the low setting and blend up the kaolin clay. Okay, so I am thoroughly pleased with how that blended up. Like a million times better than that cheapo $20 immersion blender I had. So I'm very pleased with that. Now you might hear some other soap makers say that they incorporate their kaolin clay at this time as well, meaning before you add any lye water, before you add any colorants or fragrance. And I do that too because you can blend for longer without speeding up your trace, and you can make sure that all the little clumps of kaolin clay are out. Last thing you want is little clumps of clay in your final soap product. So that's done. I'm gonna move on to adding my sodium lactate to the cooled lye solution. So here we are. You may recall that I'm making up 2 batches of soap here. So I've got 2 batches of lye solution, 2 batches of oil. So to each of these containers of lye solution, I'm going to add 4 teaspoons of sodium lactate. Again, this is just glorified salt water. It's to harden up the bars because I use a lot of soft oils. Give that a little stir. And now this lye water is ready to be used in 2 different soap recipes. So I'm gonna put them off to the side again. At this point, I am ready to get soap making. So the next 2 soaps I'm going to make are one for the guys. This one is called Barbershop. It's from Candora Soap. So that will be a nice one. The other men's fragrance I do is a proprietary blend that I create, and that one is called After the Hunt. So I will put a link to that video up in the corner of the screen should you want to see me making that one. That one's really popular. And another batch of soap I'm gonna make here is with this fragrance, Unicorn Poop. Now I'm gonna be honest with you, I detest the fact that beautiful smelling fragrances have the word poop in them. There's absolutely no way I'm going to include the word poop in the name of my soap. That's essentially the exact opposite of what I want. So anyways, this is a lovely blend. To me it smells a lot like cotton candy, a typical cotton candy type fragrance. But I can see this being popular with women and girls of all ages because it's such a universally sort of friendly scent. So that's another batch of soap that I will be making shortly. So that is it for today. We've got the 2 batches of oil here. We've got the 2 batches of lye water solution. You can see my new immersion blender back there. And once these oils have cooled a little to room temperature, I'm going to be doing some soap making. Thanks so much for watching. As always, if you enjoy my videos, please remember to like, subscribe, and leave me a comment down below.